Didn't see you there. I just got done playing WZ Sports Day Austin 2023. It was a competition where 3 teams of 3 players faced off across 4 sports. Good times, good times. What's that? You want to hear more about the event outline, as well as in-depth analysis about the draft and players? Well, don't mind if I do! So for the first time here, we've got a 3-team format going. We had 9 people in total, so just enough for 3 teams of 3. And the round-robin format from Philly is making a return here. The sports being played are wiffle ball, basketball, volleyball, and soccer in that order. Soccer was actually a late add. It originally was just going to be wiffle, basketball, and volley, but we were able to secure a setup for 3v3 soccer, so you're going to be seeing a brand new form of soccer that we haven't yet seen in WZ Sports Day. In the end, each team will have played 8 games in total, and the team with the best win-loss record will win, and there will be tiebreakers if necessary. And here is your list of 9 players this time around. The captains are Doobie, who will be the captain of the Aqua team, Joseph, the captain of Purple team, and Larry, the captain of Yellow team. Like last time, pick priority order was in effect. Larry had his first choice of pick. He went with 3rd pick for the wraparound picks. Next up was Doobie, who opted for the 1st pick, and then Joseph was left with the 2nd pick. Below you can see the players that they got to choose from, and I've tried to crop out the jerseys as much as I could as to not spoil. Coming up shortly, you will be able to see who was drafted onto what team and in what order, with highlights and analysis for each player. So let's get into that. Hey guys, just cutting in real quick to let you know that I recorded the pre-game analysis before the Sports Day event. However, soccer was a bit of a last-second addition to the event, so in this analysis you're going to hear me talking as though soccer isn't in the event and there are only 3 sports. That's because that was the original plan. So just to avoid any confusion, that's why soccer isn't going to be mentioned here. That being said, I still will have those soccer stats on screen and highlights as well from soccer in the previous events. Just wanted to clear that up beforehand. Enjoy the video. The first captain we're going to be talking about here today is Doobie. This is his 2nd event in a row being a captain. It's the first time we've seen a repeat captain at all, and the reason for that is because his last event in Philly was cut short due to injury. So because we needed a 3rd captain anyways, we had Doobie fill in because he didn't exactly get the full experience last time. That said, Doobie getting the 1st pick here, that is with 2nd pick priority, so it was not the 1st option off the board. He was able to choose between 1st and 2nd pick, ended up opting for the 1st pick. And looking more at Doobie himself, he has a nice track record of success in WZ Sports Day, with a 1st place finish and a tie 1st finish. So he hasn't outright lost one yet. Looking at the stats here, the numbers themselves don't really jump off the page in this particular lineup of 3 sports, but I would say his definite best sport out of these 3 is volleyball, where he has a really solid presence. Even if it doesn't show in the numbers, he plays excellent backline, he's great at receiving. He's really going to support his team. And in wiffle ball, not too shabby either. You have to consider that in Philly, he was playing wiffle ball hurt, which could have impacted his numbers at the plate. But in Phoenix at full strength, we saw him as an above-average hitter. Basketball, I think, is definitely the biggest worry. We've only seen him play it in Phoenix to not great results. But I think Doobie is really great to have on your team as a supportive piece. So the fact that he has that 1st pick and is going to be able to draft a superstar type player complements him perfectly. We're going to have to see what team he ends up with. With the 2nd pick, it's going to be Joseph. He's making his 1st appearance as a captain in Sports Day. He will be the captain of the Purple team this time around. Joe is an interesting one to talk about because he's so difficult to project skill-wise with how dominant he is in wiffle ball, but where he actually does kind of falter a bit in some of the other sports. And in this event in particular, it arguably has his 2 worst sports in volleyball and basketball, but with one of the 3 sports being wiffle ball, which he is such a dominating force in, you really have to consider that heavily, and that's why he was given last priority on selecting his pick. So because of that, he ended up with the 2nd pick, which means he's going to have some tough decisions to make, and he's going to have to craft his team strategically according to his own weaknesses. Like I said, wiffle ball, there's no doubt about it, he's a game changer. At the plate, he has kind of fallen off since Atlanta, but he's still overall a great hitter. He's tied for the career lead in home runs with 4, so he's definitely a power threat at the plate, but his real claim to fame is pitching, where he is just far and away the best pitcher in WZ Sports Day history. Really great at missing bats, he strikes out a ton of batters, highest career strikeouts with 35. Really great at preventing runs with that 2.08 ERA. Now the cause for concern are these other 2 sports. Volleyball I think is his second best. In Phoenix he really struggled a lot in volleyball, but we did see an improvement in Philly notably. Unfortunately I do still think he was at best middle of the pack in Philly volleyball, so he's still got some more work to do. The bigger concern is undoubtedly basketball, where we've only seen him play in Phoenix where he struggled mightily. Kind of similar to Doobie in that regard, who we last talked about in basketball. He's got a lot to prove there, and in 3v3 basketball as well, he's gonna have to step up to help his team get some wins. That being said, with Joseph as your captain in this competition, if you're solid at volleyball or basketball, you're gonna be sitting pretty in this event. The third and final captain is going to be Larry, making his first captain appearance. He was given first priority to select his pick, and he went for that third pick with the wraparound picks. We saw a very similar situation last time around where Anks had first priority and also chose the last pick. Getting to craft your whole team in one go is clearly something that these captains really hold in a high regard, and you can understand why. You have full control over your team in that case, and that's obviously what Larry was going for here. He will be the captain of the yellow team. We did not see him in the last Sports Day event. He was not there for Philly. However, he does have a Sports Day win in his repertoire with Red Team in Atlanta. His most recent event, however, is a loss in Phoenix with Purple. Seeing as he got that first priority of pick, he was perceived to be the weakest captain of the 3. So let's do a deeper dive into why that may or may not be so accurate. In the 3 sports that will be featured in this Sports Day, Larry grades out pretty average in all 3 of them, to be honest. His career OPS plus in wiffle ball is 73, where 100 is league average, so that is a bit of a cause for concern. But he is a nice table setter kind of player where he is pretty good at getting on base, and will be very solid on the base paths and in the field. Basketball too, I mean, he's a really nice supportive player. His points per game isn't even too shabby, and he gets a ton of rebounds, and is just generally really good at being all over the board. He's got a ton of stamina. To me, I think the biggest concern for Larry is actually volleyball, where he did play in Phoenix and graded out pretty average, and by the eye test. But the question is how he's going to fare in a 3v3 format, because we only saw him in 5v5. And in 3v3, a lot more responsibility is going to go on each player in the games. Larry is pretty similar to Doobie for me, where I think he's not really someone who's going to steal the show and take over a game in any case, but he's always going to be there behind the scenes, putting in work. And we'll have to see what kind of team he makes for himself with those wraparound picks. The first pick of the draft selected on the Aqua team is going to be Wally. No surprises here. This is his 3rd time out of 3 sports days being first picked overall in the draft. Happened in Atlanta on the red team and Philly on the orange team. He's got a great reputation as a superstar player in WZ Sports Day, and you can understand why. He's got a great history of success with a first place and a tie first, and these individual numbers as well are very impressive across the board. Especially for this slate of sports, I think this is quite possibly Wally's top 3 sports. In the picture of overall WZ Sports Day, if there's any weakness for Wally, it is soccer, and that's not present here. Instead, we're seeing basketball, which is his best sport, followed by wiffle ball as his second best in my eyes, and volleyball at 3rd. In this lineup of players, he could definitely just take over the game in basketball, and I think that's something that Doobie recognizes and is hoping for him to do on his team. And then in wiffle ball, he's not only going to contribute at the plate, where he's one of the top offensive players in WZ, but also has shown some good promise on the mound pitching as well, to some solid numbers. He might slot in as Aqua Team's main pitcher. In volleyball, he didn't exactly have a stellar performance in Philly, but we definitely saw a lot of potential, especially with those serves. He was definitely a solid player there, and if you're slotting that in as his worst sport in this lineup, then you're really looking good going into this event. The caveat to Doobie getting Wally with his first pick is that he also will be saddled with the very last pick in the draft. We'll have to see who that is and how impactful it may end up being. But with Doobie and Wally, you're off to a great start. With the second overall pick in the draft, Joe has selected Haller onto the purple team. This is actually the third time out of 4 events that Haller and Joe have been on the same team. They were both on blue team in Atlanta and both on black team in Phoenix. That Philly sports day has been the only sports day where they have been on opposite sides of the field. So these two have a lot of experience playing together, and you can definitely understand why Haller's coming in high here at the second pick. Despite there being a few options you could reasonably select at 2, Haller makes a lot of sense because he's really a solid force in all 3 of these. Basketball, he's kind of broken out as a sleeper pick, after Philly particularly, where he had an excellent performance as arguably one of the best basketball players there. He's first place all time in both field goal percent and 3-point percent. He's good at getting rebounds, assisting, putting points on the board. Volleyball too, like Doobie, the numbers don't really do him justice because he's a backline player, which doesn't look good on the stats generally. But the service aces, 38 all time, that's by far first. The biggest concern would be wiffle ball, where he does grade out below average all time for his career at the plate. The pitching sample is too small to go off of, but with Joe on your team, he's most likely not going to see the mound regardless. Haller has had some pretty high variance from meetup to meetup, so perhaps some consistency issues there, which does make him a bit of a risky pick here at 2, since we saw him go from having a pretty bad event in Atlanta to being an MVP candidate in Phoenix, to having a more kind of average event in Philly. You don't really know what you're going to get exactly with him, but he does definitely have that ceiling of an MVP candidate. And we're going to have to see if he lives up to that potential in this competition. Alright, first off, you know the drill by now, referring to myself in the third person. Coming in at third pick, it's going to be TK, picked by Larry, onto the yellow team. This is the second time they've been on a team together. They were teammates in the very first sports day in Atlanta, where they took home a win with red team. And right away, you have to notice, this is quite possibly the best looking stat page we've seen for this competition. 2 first place finishes and a tie for first most recently, and then just a lot popping off the page on the individual numbers. Really impressive wiffle ball statistics at the plate, basically leads in almost every single major offensive category in wiffle ball, and most recently had his best hitting performance yet in Philly, where he got on base 80% of the time while also hitting for power. But the hitting really has been there for him in every single WZ Sports Day competition so far. The bigger question mark in wiffle ball is going to be the pitching. Pretty good on the mound as well, although there's definitely been some consistency issues there. And volleyball has looked great as well in both meetups, where he's played really good frontline for his team. However, it is worth noting that TK has basically little to no experience playing backline in WZ Sports Day volleyball, and depending on what his team ends up shaking out to be, that might be a role that he is expected or needed to fill. It's yet to be seen just how serviceable he'll be able to be in the back lines. We also haven't seen a lot of serves out of him, and for this sports day, volleyball will be implementing a mandatory forced service rotation. So every player on every team is going to have to make their serves. He doesn't have an overabundance of service errors in his small sample size, but we'll have to see how he's able to serve consistently when he's being forced to make more reps. The biggest cause for concern here is definitely basketball, where we've seen a steady downtrend across the meetups in performance, with his most recent one in Philly being among the worst basketball players in the event. But in the other 2 sports, you're getting pretty reliable, consistent performances here. But with the team so far being Larry and TK, definite concern in basketball, and we'll have to see how that shakes out for them. Rounding out the yellow team, Larry has selected King with the 4th pick in the draft, reuniting with Larry, who he was teammates with in Phoenix. King's a really solid overall player. I think I've said this in every deep dive so far, but King is someone where the numbers aren't really going to jump off the page, but you're just getting a solid all-around contributor. In wiffle ball, both at the plate and on the mound, he's going to just be an average to above average player, and he's not been too bad in volleyball either, where I think we saw some improvement from Phoenix to Philly as well. With basketball, the numbers look pretty bad, but I think it is actually a bit deceiving, because his points per game numbers are really hurt by limited play time, at least in the cases of Atlanta and Philly. Phoenix, though, he did definitely struggle in basketball. I think he's got some potential in basketball that hasn't really been realized yet in WZ Sports Day. But the problem is that that's a huge question mark, and that this yellow team, now complete with Larry TK King, will almost certainly have some struggles in basketball. But they're looking good for wiffle and volleyball. I think King is a really solid wiffle ball player, the one concern there being the dip in performance that we saw in Phoenix at the plate, but he really performed great there in Philly, and I think he could be a solid player in volleyball as well. We'll have to see how King fares along with the now complete yellow team. Fifth pick of the draft is going to be RCP, coming in pretty low here in my opinion, and he'll be joining Joe and Haller, who he's not been teammates with before. While the results may not really be there, seeing as he is still looking for his first sports day win, the individual performances are certainly respectable. In this lineup of 3 sports, we're seeing 2 where he's been pretty solid in wiffle ball and basketball, and not too bad in volleyball either. He was at the very least a solid server. With wiffle ball, there's been definite struggles on the mound, but that's not really going to be a problem because he's got Joe on his team who will most likely be pitching all their innings. What he's going to need to focus on is his performance at the plate, where we've seen him be above average, well above average in the case of Atlanta, and really solid numbers for his career. The fact that Joe was able to get not only Haller but also RCP for basketball is great for him, since that is his weak point and it's where Haller and RCP both shine. The performances in basketball have almost certainly not been up to RCP's standard either, so we could be seeing improvement in the numbers there as well. Volleyball is definitely the concern for not only RCP but also just Purple Team in general. I think it's their weakest sport of the 3, but even then I think they've got a decent chance there. RCP didn't play in Philly, so might be dealing with some rust when it comes to some of these sports, but overall I think getting RCP at the second to last pick in the draft is an absolute steal. For me, definitely my sleeper pick of the draft. The 6th and final pick of the draft is going to be Anks, rounding out the Aqua team with Doobie and Wally. Anks historically has come in pretty low in these drafts, unfortunately, and you can kind of understand why. Not a great track record here in terms of team results or the individual performances. With that said, I do actually have some high hopes for him in this event. Just a couple events ago, Anks and Doobie were coming in as the bottom 2 overall picks in the draft in Phoenix, and now we're seeing them join forces together on Aqua team here, and despite that, I think that they are very legitimate contenders for the championship here. Doobie obviously already showed he was being underestimated in Phoenix, but for Anks on the other hand, I think it's actually just been a steady progression of getting better and better every sports day. This one, unfortunately for him, doesn't include what I consider to be his 2 best sports, that being kickball and soccer, but he without a doubt improved notably in wiffle ball at the very least, where we saw him go from having 0 hits collective of the first 2 meetups to getting 10 hits and getting on base nearly 80% of the time in Philly. The power wasn't there, but he was a great table setter type of hitter who was just really solid at getting on base for his teammates to drive him in. The pitching wasn't great, but we did actually see some solid improvement throughout the day in his pitching as well. The bigger concerns for him are going to be the other 2 sports, being volleyball and basketball. In volleyball, he definitely had struggles in both Phoenix and Philly, but I have no doubt that he could at the very least step up to be serviceable on this team in volleyball. Wally and Doobie are both expected to be pretty talented in volleyball, so there's not a whole lot of pressure on him to super perform in it. Basketball, on the other hand, he is actually going to have to step up a bit. We have not seen good performances from him in basketball over any of these meetups. Anks and Doobie are both kind of weak links there, so it puts a lot of responsibility into Wally's hands, whereas Purple Team, for example, is a much more complete team in basketball, so Anks' lackluster track record in basketball could come back to bite them. He's really going to have to try and step up there. But overall, I mean, eventually I think we're going to see a breakout event from Anks. It might not necessarily be this one since the sports lineup doesn't super favor him, but it won't surprise me if we keep seeing that steady improvement that we've been seeing from him. So that's going to just about do it for this video, everyone. No draft video or interviews this time around, unfortunately. We just didn't get around to it. Here's one final look at the teams in their entirety. In the next video, we will kick off WZ Sports Day Austin 2023 with the first sport of the event, which will be wiffle ball. Look forward to it.